Hey guys, this is the MMA breakdown doing predictions for UFC on Fox 18, Johnson versus Bader. And as always, before I get into the predictions, I'm going to quickly recap my picks from the last event, UFC Fight Night 81, Dillashaw versus Cruz. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter. My link is in the description. Always live tweet during fights. I always post my UFC pick'em picks before each event, and then the results of my picks and my updated ranking after each event. So if you want to follow my progress, follow me on Twitter. Okay, so UFC Fight Night 81, Dillashaw versus Cruz. It was a bad night for me. I was 6 for 13. I can't remember the last time that I had a losing record for one event. Number 7,144 for the event, and that dropped me to 2,074 overall, down from, I think it was 696 where I was at after 195, the first event of the year. But only the second event of the year. I'm not stressing about it. You guys know how great I am. You know my credentials. Finished in the top 500 2 years in a row. So definitely intend to make my way back from that, back into the top 500. But I'm going to scroll through my picks here really quickly. Sorry, that's the wrong event. Okay, so I got every fight on the main card wrong. I scored the fight for Cruz. I scored rounds 1 through 3 and 5 for him. I thought 5 was the closest round of the fight. Dillashaw could have easily won 5. And then 3 was kind of close, but I think that's a weaker argument to score that for Dillashaw. So I gave Cruz rounds 1 through 3 and 5. But, I have to watch the fight again, but I didn't feel like it was that controversial. Close, but I definitely felt like Cruz was the decisive victor there. So, and I was really happy to see him win. I mean, you have to feel for the guy. Almost 3 years without fighting. All the injuries, and I believed what Dillashaw was saying, that the game had passed Cruz by. That's what I kind of expected, and for Cruz to come back looking like he hadn't missed a beat, and to completely figure out Dillashaw and have a guy like that in Dillashaw, who is kind of like one of these new breed guys who's just been looking incredible. To put on a performance like that against Dillashaw, and to have Dillashaw as confused and frustrated as he was, I thought it was an incredible performance, and I was really happy to see him win. And then Pettis losing to Alvarez really disappointed me. I didn't see that coming at all. The Mitrione-Brown fight, that was BS. Mitrione was winning up until the eye poke. Pearson, really disappointing performance from him. Boach, I didn't see him. I wouldn't have seen that knockout coming in a million years. Really surprising loss there. Sanders had a great debut performance. And the one pick that I changed from my video, I picked Cruikshank, but ended up going with Felder at the last minute. But then when the fight started, Cruikshank was doing everything that I said he was going to do, using the takedowns, being more aggressive. But then Felder pulled it out at the last minute in the third round, so I'm happy that I ended up going with him, but kind of messed with my head a little bit, because I felt like for the whole fight that I should have gone with my gut pick, but then Felder ended up winning, so that's kind of weird for me. Okay, Rosa I thought could have easily lost that fight and probably deserved to. Font looked good and then got the first fight wrong. Okay, enough of that. So let's get on with the predictions. UFC on Fox 18, Johnson versus Bader. I think it's a decent main card. Definitely not your typical Fox level main card, but that's because they went all out on the last event, Dillashaw versus Cruz. They gave us the first ever title fight on FS1, and that is what we're accustomed to getting for Fox, so they kind of doomed themselves to under-deliver for this card. Feels more like a Fox Sports 1 caliber main card, but not bad, especially the main and co-main events. And then some decent matchups on the prelim card. Some other ones I'm not so interested in, but overall I'd say it's a decent event. Okay, starting off with the UFC Fight Pass prelim card at welterweight, Matt Dwyer versus Randy Brown. Not going to be able to make a pick here. I don't know anything about Randy Brown, debuting fighter. Matt Dwyer, I was deceived by his brutal first round knockout loss to Albert Tumanov in his debut fight, but then had two really strong performances after that. Thought he looked great against William Macario, was technically dismantling him with range striking, and then finished him off with the Superman punch. And then made the Joban fight very competitive. He definitely resorted to some really sloppy, awkward striking in that fight, but still managed to hurt Joban a few times and was brawling with him till the end of that fight. So I've been impressed with Dwyer over his last two performances, but can't make a pick there. Next up, a lightweight, Tony Martin versus another debuting fighter, Felipe Olivieri. Again, can't make a pick. Tony Martin has been up and down, has had some performances I really liked. His debut fight against Rashid Magomedov, I remember he had him in an armbar in the first round. Looked like he had Magomedov in some really excruciating pain, almost finished it but didn't, and then had a loss to Beneil Dariush, got submitted, now boxed in that fight. Submitted Fabrizio Camoys with a Kimura. Thought that was impressive, taking out a jiu-jitsu guy. And then lost his last fight to Leonardo Santos. Wasn't competitive there and couldn't compete on the ground. So up and down. Think he has some solid grappling and submission skills. He's a big physical guy for a lightweight, but I can't make a pick here. All right, and then the last fight on the Fight Pass card at featherweight, Levon Makashvili versus Damon Jackson. I've been back and forth on this fight, but I think I have to go with Jackson. Levon Makashvili, I believe he's a Russian fighter or Dagestani, but to me, after his debut performance over Mark Edeva, I did not get the impression that he's some kind of super talent. It was not a dominant performance. For one thing, it was a split decision, and for another thing, Mark Edeva is not a high-level fighter even to get a win over in your UFC debut. And then he lost to Hakran Diaz, and I'll be honest, I don't remember anything about that fight. I don't even remember it taking place. With all the fights that go on these days in the UFC, some of them just slip through the cracks, and I just looked at his record, and I'm completely blanking on that fight. I have a feeling he got out wrestled and out grappled though by Hakran Diaz. It wasn't split decision, but my point is I don't think he looked that great against Mark Edeva. Edeva made it competitive on the feet. Makashvili was able to get some takedowns, but I don't think his takedowns seemed to come that easily. He looks to be more of a Greco wrestler than a traditional American wrestler like Damon Jackson, who was showing some pretty fluid takedowns in his last fight against Honey Jason. I thought his striking looked pretty crisp in that fight too. He was winning the striking battle, was using a good jab. His takedowns came easily, was working the ground and pound, and just got caught in Honey Jason's triangle. So I don't know. I don't think either of these guys are really going to have much success in the UFC, but I think I have to go with Jackson. I think in his two fights, we've just seen a little more of a well-rounded game than what we've seen from Makashvili. Again, I like Jackson striking. I think his takedowns come a little more easily. I'm going to take Jackson, but it's close, and I don't really feel confident about that pick. All right, next up, moving on to the Fox Sports 1 card at bantamweight, Alex Caceres versus Macio Fullen. Not really a compelling matchup to me. I'm taking Alex Caceres here. He just has way more experience in the UFC against far more credible competition than the couple of guys that Macio Fullen has fought in the UFC. Actually, he's only fought one fight so far. But Macio Fullen, a fighter off of Toughland America, got knocked out with a head kick by Leonardo Morales, who did not go on to have success in the UFC, lost both of his fights. And then in Fullen's last fight against Alex Torres, it was a really back and forth, close, sloppy brawl. And I believe he's training with, I don't remember it. I think it's one of the, I think it might be MMA Lab in Arizona. I can't recall, but all of those Latin America guys, they go to a top gym. I think he's, like I said, I think he's training with a top gym. But Alex Caceres, has the experience advantage. Although Alex Caceres has really had his share of very disappointing performances at this point. Just getting ran over by Francisco Rivera in his last fight, getting knocked out in 21 seconds with a head kick. His striking, he doesn't have the fundamental boxing. He really favors that dynamic movement using angles, and we've seen that work. He was doing well with that against Faber before Faber just decided to take him down and submit him. But I really feel Caceres has been overrated throughout his UFC career. Has struggled with the grappling against a couple of the Japanese fighters, Kyung-Ho Kang, Matanobu Tezuka. I remember a lot of fans saying that he should have lost that fight. And even the Sergio Pettis fight is one kind of signature win. I thought he was getting outstruck thoroughly for the entirety of that fight until he was able to create a scramble at the end. And then, lost his last 3 fights to Rivera, Faber, and in the middle there to Kanahara, who just, with pressure and forward movement, was able to walk him down, outbox him, and take him down. So I think Caceres is definitely slipping. And Fullen, if he's aggressive and looks to make it a brawl, I think that could be enough with him training at a top camp to edge out a decision here. But I think that's unlikely. Caceres should still be the far more experienced fighter with a far higher level skill set on the grappling and on the feet, I think. So I'm going to go with Caceres here, but watch out. He has become a head case, and he is declining, I think. All right. Next up at welterweight, George Sullivan versus Alexander Yakovlev. Not really a compelling matchup. George Sullivan, I think he should win this fight. He has a lot higher output in his fights. He was relentless in his last fight against Dominic Waters. A very persistent wrestler, and then was really active with his ground and pound all over Waters in that fight. Completely dominated him. Really fell short against Tim Means, but Tim Means is becoming a top talent. Got dropped in that fight, was getting chewed up in the clinch, and then submitted on the ground, and had a really impressive knockout win over Igor Araujo. Took him down and knocked him out cold with big ground and pound shots. Yakovlev has been very underwhelming in the UFC. Dropped a decision to Maia, had a late comeback in that fight, but still got out-wrestled, out-grappled for the majority of it. Nico Musoke just out-clinched him for the entire fight, and he couldn't do anything about it. And then his last fight against Gray Maynard, even though he won and dropped Maynard late in that fight, I actually thought Maynard won that fight. He was able to take him down, out-grapple him early. So he's been really underwhelming. I think Yakovlev might have the power advantage, and Sullivan, just from that loss to Means, I think his chin might be a little compromised, maybe. Just kind of a feeling I might have about his chin, but there's not much evidence supporting that. But Sullivan's just a lot harder worker, so I'm going to take him here to outwork Yakovlev. Taking Sullivan for a decision. All right, next up at flyweight, probably the most compelling matchup on the entire card. Definitely on the prelim card, and probably more compelling than a couple fights on the main card. But Dustin Ortiz versus Wilson Hayes, great matchup. And I feel like a lot of people are going to overlook Hayes here, and they're going to take Ortiz. And I can understand that. Ortiz has a really good skill set, classic wrestle boxer, a really strong, dominant win over Willie Gates in his last fight. Took him down, was pounding him out, and then took his back to get the sub. But I think you have to look a little more closely at the matchup here. Wilson Hayes is an underrated fighter, and he's a strong grappler. You can look to his Jorgensen fight, where right out of the gate he came out, took him down, subbed him out. Even from his first fight in the UFC against Ivan Menjivar, he out-grappled him, was able to stay in mount the entire fight. But also against Joby Sanchez, taking the back standing, and he did get nailed with a head kick and dropped there. And then at bantamweight, before he dropped down to flyweight, had a competitive fight with Yuri Alcantara where he dropped him early in that fight and had a lot of good competitive scrambles. And then also his last fight against Jussier Formiga, lost a unanimous decision, but I thought the fight was closer than that. I thought he kept it competitive. And Dustin Ortiz, while he's a strong wrestler, we've seen that in the Moraga fight, and like I said, the Willie Gates fight, and he's a decent boxer. I don't think he can really win with his boxing, but he's okay there. Was able to trade with Benavidez for 3 rounds. Did lose clearly, but was able to hang in there and didn't get badly hurt. I think on the ground, Hayes is just gonna have the better grappling. I don't know if Ortiz has the grappling chops to hang with him on the ground. It's going to be wrestling versus grappling. And if you think back to the Justin Scoggins fight, that was a back and forth scramble fest where Ortiz got caught in an armbar at one point, looked pretty close, and I actually thought Scoggins won that fight. I think some other people did too. In the Ray Borg fight, Borg was able to slip out from bottom and take his back several times. Other than the Moraga fight, which he lost in the Willie Gates fight, Ortiz hasn't been a super dominant wrestler. So I think I'm going to have to take Heiss here, just having the jiu-jitsu background, showing that in his fights, and I just haven't seen enough of Ortiz's grappling game against high-level competition. I mean, Willie Gates is not a high-level grappler, and neither is John Moraga, really. So I'm going to take Heiss here, but Ortiz is becoming an elite fighter in that division, and I think he's definitely more aggressive. He's more devastating with his striking and ground and pound. But it's going to be a tough fight, and I just like Heiss to have the better grappling chops. So I'm going to take Heiss here for a decision. All right, next up in middleweight, Kevin Casey versus Rafael Natal. Not a compelling matchup, really. I'm taking Natal here. Natal just has a more well-rounded game. Casey, seems to be a very... he doesn't seem too athletic to me. He's old, 34, and just looks slow and unathletic to me. He doesn't look like a fluid grappler. His last fight against Alcantara, Ildemar Alcantara, just kind of a lay-and-pray performance. Didn't threaten with submissions, didn't do much with the ground and pound. And his first one in the UFC was a dominant stoppage over Bubba Bush in the first round, but I think that was a very low-level opponent. Natal, we've seen him, be a more effective grappler. He gets reversals at times on the ground, which is very rare today in MMA. We saw that in the Tor Troen fight and another fight, I believe. I just see him being a more fluid grappler, a better scrambler, and then on the feet, I think he's just going to be way more mobile and athletic. He gets stuck sometimes in his fights, or just kind of wants to push you against the fence and clinch with you, like the Uriah Hall fight, even the Ed Herman fight that he ended up losing. I thought he won, though. But, he uses leg kicks. He's a decent kickboxer, and I don't think Casey really has that. I just don't think Casey's really mobile or athletic enough to keep up with him here. So I'm going to take Natal for a decision. All right, next up at lightweight, Olivier Aubin-Mercier versus Carlos Diego Ferreira. This is grappling versus power, I think. That's how I'm viewing the matchup. I have to go with Aubin-Mercier here, though, maybe an underdog pick. But I feel like this is going to be a very similar matchup to the Beneil Dariush Ferreira fight. And Ferreira, after his debut fight, seemed to be a really elite grappler, taking out Colton Smith used judo to get him to the ground and then submitted him. But Dariush badly out-grappled him. Ferreira just looked undersized, frankly, for lightweight. Couldn't deal with the grappling from Dariush, and he just got out-wrestled and held down that entire fight. And Aubin-Mercier showed that he can do that against a dangerous striker. Did that in his last fight against Tony Sims, who had proven to have knockout power and be a good boxer. And there were a few moments on the feet where Mercier looked a little shell-shocked, but was able to get the takedown and hold him down. So I think he can do that to Ferreira. Ferreira has some power, but he's been knocked out himself against Poirier, and the only guy knocked out in the UFC is Ramsey Nijem, which actually doesn't mean too much, I don't think. So I'm expecting Mercier to be able to get him down and out-grapple him here. Aubin-Mercier for the decision. All right, next up at welterweight, Tarek Saffiedine versus Jake Ellenberger. A really sad fight. I think both of these guys, well, clearly Ellenberger, everybody knows now. There's no question about it. He just can't compete at a high level anymore. And Saffiedine, I think, is on his way to being there also. Ellenberger, I say this every time, since I've been making videos. It was after that Martin Kampmann loss where he got knocked out. He just completely changed. He became gun-shy. Briefly returned to form against Marquardt, but that was it. You can go back and watch his first fight after the Kampmann loss. It was against Jay Huron. Was totally gun-shy, completely changed his style, didn't do those big blitzing attacks like he used to. And since then, he's just looked uninspired. The loss to Gastelum I thought was really bad. And he doesn't have any confidence in his hands. Did manage to drop Wonder Boy in his last fight, but that was it. They got back to the feet. We saw what Wonder Boy did to him. So Saffiedine, I think, is just going to be a far more superior kickboxer technically, especially at range. Ellenberger, he's not going to have a chance to. He's not going to have a chance of beating Saffiedine striking at range. Saffiedine himself, though, took a pretty brutal beating, getting knocked out by Rory McDonald in his last fight, and that was October of 2 years ago now, so a long time out. And Saffiedine himself isn't a terribly active striker. Against Hyun-Gyu Lim, had his legs completely chewed up in that fight. The guy was fighting on one leg, and Saffiedine still wouldn't let his hands go and chase the finish. So I think Ellenberger has the power if he decides to come forward and fight like his old self. He could. I think he could take out Saffiedine like that, but he's just been so gun shy. He looks like he's mentally broken. Taking Saffiedine to win a decision here with the better kickboxing, fighting at range. Taking Saffiedine. All right, on to the main card at welterweight, Sage Northcutt versus Brian Barberena. This is going to be a tough fight for Northcutt. It really is. I think it's a way tougher matchup than Andrew Holbrook would have been, or a tougher fight than Cody Pfister was. And he even took Northcutt down and won that first round. But still, I think Northcutt just has that insane athleticism, and I think that's going to carry him a long way, even if he doesn't have the fundamental skills yet. But we saw against Pfister, got taken down. That didn't look too good. But then that second round, he came out. He looked fresh, and he took down Pfister and submitted him. And then on the feet, Barberena's no high-level technical striker, but he's really tough. He comes forward, and he dropped Laprise in their fight late. He had the better cardio late, and same thing against Joe Ellenberger. Started slow, lost. I think he lost the first round, but ended up overwhelming Ellenberger and finished him. But I don't view either of those wins as very high level. The Laprise fight a little bit more so, but Northcutt, that athleticism and his hand speed that he showed against Trevino, I think that might be enough here to beat Barberena. But I think if Northcutt loses the fight, it's going to be because he tries to empty the tank in the first round, gets gassed, and then Barberena will take over. If Northcutt just tries to stick to his wrestling, uses athleticism, I think he can get the win. And on the feet, Northcutt might not have the same power that Barberena has, but definitely has the advantage of being an unorthodox dynamic striker. So I'm still going to take Northcutt, but close, tough fight. Barberena is real tough, and I think it should be Northcutt's biggest test so far in the UFC. But I will take Northcutt for a decision. All right, next up at bantamweight, Yuri Alcantara versus Jimmy Rivera. This is a pretty interesting matchup, and I'm going to take Rivera here. I'm sure that's going to be the underdog pick, but Yuri Alcantara, he's looked great in some of his fights. He comes out and kills you in the first round. He's had several performances like that, but against really low-level competition. Iliardi Santos, the Pedro Nobre fight, Von Lee. His power on the feet. He's a really devastating grappler, especially early, can finish you quickly on the ground. But if he doesn't get you out of there early, he's not a great fighter over the course of several rounds. We saw him get out wrestled by Frankie Saenz, and his guard game from his back wasn't enough to get back to his feet or put himself in good positions on the ground. Saenz was able to nullify his guard and win the scrambles. Even his fight, like I mentioned earlier, against Wilson Heiss, that was a very close fight. A lot of close scrambles, and he wasn't able to be dominant in that fight. And even Russell Doan, I think he dominated most of that fight. I remember he had his back and was working a choke. I think that was early in the fight, but Doan was able to survive and take that fight 3 rounds. And Jimmy Rivera seems like a really effective striker, not terribly dynamic, but has really solid fundamental boxing combinations, his big power. Loved his debut knockout win over Marcus Brimage. And then in his last fight against Pedro Munhoz, just proved to have the better boxing, the better combinations. Seems to have good striking defense on the feet. And I just think Alcantara doesn't have that same fundamental striking. More of a guy who can catch you with one shot, but I think Rivera's defense will be too good for that. I think he's going to get out of the first round, and then from there, I don't see Alcantara, who's not a wrestler, I don't see him being able to just overwhelm him with speed like he's done to other guys, and I think Rivera has the better boxing. So I'm going to take Rivera here to win a decision. Alcantara is more well-rounded, has a better skill set, but I don't see him taking him down, so I think Rivera outboxes him on the feet, gets the decision. All right, at heavyweight, co-main event, Josh Barnett versus Ben Rothwell. Great matchup. Probably the one I'm looking forward to most on the entire card. Really, really close matchup and kind of tough to call. Barnett, without a doubt, is a more well-rounded fighter, a far more highly skilled fighter than Rothwell in every area. I thought Barnett's last win over Roy Nelson, I thought his performance was great. His cardio, he had enough cardio to last all 5 rounds and won, I think, every round, if not nearly every round. But in the clinch, his elbows from the clinch, his dirty boxing, his knees looked fantastic against Nelson. So I think that's where he can expose Rothwell, is in the clinch. I think he can drag him down to the ground. I've really been itching to see Barnett's ground game. We haven't seen it since his Strikeforce days, but we know he's a technician on the ground. He's got a great mount. His subs over Karatanov and Brett Rogers, his arm triangle choke. And Rothwell's been a guy who struggled in the scrambles, in the clinch. Gabriel Gonzaga pulled guard for a guillotine. I think submitted him while he was still standing with the guillotine. And, the Mark Hunt fight several years ago, I know that was long ago, that was in Denver, but still, Mark Hunt was able to take this guy down and even attempted an armbar late and, just out-grappled him for their whole fight. Barnett can certainly do that. So I think Barnett just has, undoubtedly he's the more highly skilled fighter in every area, but he is old, and for every second that the fight stays on the feet, Rothwell will have that opportunity to connect. And like I said, Barnett's an old guy. He hasn't shown signs of having a weak chin. I mean, this is a guy who went 5 rounds with Cormier and got his share of strikes in. But that's something to consider. Rothwell has that big power, so that opportunity will be there over 3 rounds if Barnett can't get him out of there. But Rothwell also not a decision fighter, not like Barnett is. If he can't create that opportunity for himself like he did against Overeem, he doesn't have much else. Even against Mitrione, wasn't getting anything done on the feet. It wasn't until Mitrione shot in, decided to take him down, that he caught him in the submission. And even like in the Brandon Vera fight, he didn't come alive until the 3rd round, and that was a very uneventful fight for most of it early on. So Rothwell, doesn't have much of a game plan, isn't really a process fighter. I think Barnett gets him in the clinch, gets him down to the ground, and wins this fight. But, watch out for that power from Rothwell. But I will take Barnett for the decision. All right, next up, the main event, light heavyweight Anthony Johnson versus Ryan Bader. This, to me, is not a competitive matchup at all. And Ryan Bader's definitely been getting better. I acknowledge that. I'm not discrediting him, but I think he's just proven time and time again he is not an elite fighter. Guys, Anthony Johnson is the worst possible matchup for Ryan Bader. The guys he's lost to are guys that can put pressure on him and have big power in their striking. The Glover-Teixeira fight, even though Bader dropped him early in that fight, started to work a front choke. Teixeira got back to the feet. They started trading. Bader just leaves himself wide open. He doesn't have great striking defense, and Teixeira clipped him. Same thing in the Machida fight. Machida wasn't pressuring him, but still Bader, against a high-level striker, he couldn't offer anything on the feet, decided to rush in, and got clocked by Machida. So, the guys that Bader has beaten, the guys he's knocked out, I think the only guy he knocked out in the UFC was Jason Brills. Just bottom of the ladder guys. And the Matt Yushchenko fight, when he submits guys, it's because another old guy, Matt Yushchenko, I think he dropped him and then submitted him off of that. Other than that, Bader is not a submission guy. You think back to the Anthony Perosh fight. He had this guy, beaten to a bloody pulp on the ground, had his back, and Perosh was completely defenseless, and Bader couldn't even take his back or attempt a submission, and couldn't even finish him with the ground and pound. So, in his 5-fight win streak, they've all been decisions. Even against Ovince St. Preux, was able to take him down. He couldn't hold St. Preux down. He couldn't submit him, and on the feet, I didn't think he looked that comfortable. And the Phil Davis fight, I didn't think he won that fight, and you just see how hesitant and uncomfortable he gets on the feet. When he's worried about something. I think he was really worried about the takedown threat from Phil Davis, and just didn't let his hands go, didn't want to do anything. I actually thought that he lost that fight. And against Rashad Evans, did look good, made a lot of technical improvements in his striking, but it's not a devastating or powerful striker. So I say that because people are saying, well, if Johnson doesn't finish him early, he's going to get taken down and submitted. I don't think there's a chance of that happening. I already said, Bader, he hasn't been able to submit much lower level fighters, even when he's able to take him down all the time. And Anthony Johnson, this guy's not some bum wrestler. You think back to the Charlie Brenneman fight, stuffed all of his takedowns, knocked him out on the feet. He's gotten wins with his wrestling before, like against Dan Hardy. And if people are thinking that Johnson is going to get submitted because Cormier did that to him, Bader is not Cormier at all. Again, when Bader gets guys down, they can get back up to their feet. You think of the Rampage fight or any of the other fights I mentioned, the Cavalcanti fight, St. Preux, whatever. He's not a guy who just gets a takedown and holds him down for the rest of the round. His ground and pound is not that devastating, and on the feet does not have. He has power on occasion, but has only knocked out Jason Brills, and the only other guy he showed power against was Teixeira, who ended up knocking him out. So Johnson just at lightweight really has a new level of power, and I think he's just going to run over Ryan Bader in the first round. Bader's been knocked out before. That's his weakness. I think Johnson is too athletic and is too good takedown defense to let Bader just grind him out. And we saw a really patient performance from Anthony Johnson against Phil Davis in his return to the UFC. And if Phil Davis couldn't take down Anthony Johnson once over 3 rounds, I definitely don't think Bader has a chance to. And Bader, couldn't take down Phil Davis. So definitely going with Johnson here. I think he gets a first round knockout. Bader's been getting better. He has, but just not, he's been incrementally getting better and, slowly moving along. He hasn't made these big jumps in his career where he's moving up to a new tier. He's pretty much where he's always been in the division. So have to go with Johnson. Even after the Cormier fight, I thought his performance against Jimmy Manuwa was really impressive. So got to go with Anthony Johnson here. Gets that first round knockout, definitely. So those are my predictions for UFC on Fox 18, Johnson versus Bader. Thank you guys for watching. I'm sorry that I was late with this video. I've been very busy lately, but I definitely plan to get back on track, start getting my videos out early again. So I'll be back soon with my video for UFC 196 and a couple other events in February. So be on the lookout for those to be out soon. But thank you guys. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.